Live in discomfort and you will make marginal gains. Step into the unknown and watch growth just appear out of thin air. Watch all your goals, all your aspirations just appear simply from making yourself uncomfortable and indulging in uncertainty and uncomfortability. As humans, we hate stepping outside of our comfort zone. It goes against our natural code of survival. Throughout years of evolution, we've kept this thing to keep us safe, to keep us secure. And it's basically our brains telling us that there's an immediate threat that we have to fight or flee from. But the only way we can get better at things is by doing stuff that we're not good at or we've never done before, stepping into uncertainty and uncomfortability. Comfort is provided through the fact that we know the outcome of what we're doing. We know that if we're working a job for 40 hours a week, we're going to be paid a specific amount at the end of each month. And using an example, this is why someone can be scared to quit their job to pursue their passion, because they know what they're going to be paid by the end of the month, and they know that if they quit that job, that pay slip is now removed. They won't be receiving that annual salary that they will be guaranteed to receive. But with the passion that they want to pursue, who knows if they're successful or not? It's the unknown, it's uncertainty, and that's what scares them. That's what keeps them in paralysis and stops them from making the move they want to make. Now, there are two ways to learn to live with the uncomfortable and make marginal gains, leaps in progress. Now, I'll start with the more sustainable one. However, it is less effective, but I'll explain why later. Graded exposure. Now, graded exposure is a psychological term. To put it simply, it's the gradual easing into uncomfortability. You know, whether that's starting off with an anxiety pumping activity once a day or once a week, and then, you know, just slowly upping the number once you start to become more confident, more comfortable with doing these things that, you know, signal to your brain that there's a threat. The reason why I say this method is sustainable is because you can keep it up for the rest of your life and you move at your own pace. No one is there to rush you. No one is there to push you to the next stage if you're not ready for it. You know, you have say over how fast you progress. It's the same as progressive overload in the gym. You may work at a rep range from 6 to 8, for example, and let's say you're repping 25 kg on incline dumbbell press or something like that. So for the first few sessions, you're hitting 6 reps, right? The lower end of the rep range. But over the course of a few sessions, you start to reach 8, and then you start to reach 8 more comfortably. You're able to reach 8 consistently every set. So then you up it to 28 kg. Now you've gone back down to 6 because it's a higher weight, so you're only just getting 6 in, right? And then you repeat that until you get to 8, and then you up the weight. Now that's sustainable, that's moving at your own pace. There's no jumping into things, there's no, you know, risk of burnout because you're moving slowly, you're gradually easing into things. Now, the reason why I said this is less effective is because it requires patience. Just like the gym, it may take months on end before you see progress, but when you look at that old gym mirror picture from a year ago and you compare it to yourself now, that's when all the differences revealed to you. You have to zoom out and look at the bigger picture of progress and understand that the process will be slow, but that's what makes it worth it. That's what makes the results, you know, ultimately show. Now, the next method is flooding. Now, flooding is another psychological term, which is also known as exposure therapy. And the way I like to think of it is just jumping into the deep end and learning how to swim. You know, with no help, just literally doing the hardest thing, drowning yourself in the activity, drowning yourself in the uncertainty and the unknown until you become accustomed to it and you come out a whole new person on the other side. Because when you dive headfirst into a challenge, you're forced to adapt. You're forced to keep up because that's your only choice, unless you want failure. Now, flooding prevents you from finding a way out. There's no route to escape. There's no way out of, you know, flooding. You can't back out of it. There's no beating around the bush. And this is what allows your brain to, you know, forcefully adapt to the environment. because there's no way to go but forward. You have to face that fear, you have to face that challenge, and your brain will get used to it. Your brain will be better at handling those high stress situations or whatever's raising that anxiety in you. But why does flooding actually work? Like, what's the process behind it? Because during flooding, you cannot avoid the perceived threat. There's no way of backing out. You're forced to do the action and await the outcome that you're fearing. But upon hundreds and hundreds of repetitions of doing that action and not receiving the threat that you perceived, your brain starts to realize there's no threat. There's no threat to doing this action. And that fight or flight response is just lowered. Your guard's lowered. In a sense, your confidence raises because now you know, if I do this, the thing that I expected to happen is not happening. When practicing flooding, there are many psychological processes occurring within your brain. One being called the Pavlovian extinction. Pavlovian extinction is the gradual weakening of a learned behavior. Essentially, when we continue to repeat the uncomfortable action, but we're not met with the perceived threat that we're expecting as a result, the brain starts to link the action with the negative result lesser and lesser, while our confidence in doing the action raises. Some examples to authenticate my point, I could say, let's say someone was driving and they had a car crash at an intersection. Now, from that day, they're either going to completely avoid that intersection, or every time they're near it or they have to pass it, they may experience a panic attack. Because, they're expecting the same thing to happen again. Something that traumatized them. But let's say hundreds and hundreds of drive-thrus later, the crash didn't happen again. Each time they drove through that intersection and the crash didn't happen, they became more and more confident. They had more and more faith in the fact that the perceived threat is no longer there, and the anxiety that the perceived threat was there kept lowering until the brain just becomes accustomed to the fact that there's no crash as a result. The brain begins to unlearn the expectation of the crash. Another example I can give you, which is in fact recorded, is from Pavlov himself, where he conditioned a dog to salivate at the sound of a bell through operant conditioning. But what he did afterwards was that he taught the dog to no longer salivate after hearing the sound of a bell. And he done this through simply just not giving the treat after ringing the bell, because that's what got the dog salivating in the first place, right? He would ring the bell and then give the dog a treat. Now, in the dog's mind, the dog associates the sound of the bell with food, which is why it starts salivating. But when it starts to experience more and more ringing of the bells with no food as a result, its brain slowly, disconnects from that result until the dog may hear the sound of the bell, but like it used to salivate, it doesn't do it anymore because it's not expecting that treat, it's not expecting the food like it used to. When finding out what method is best for you, it's all up to you. Are you someone that can take a challenge? Are you someone that may be a little bit more impatient? Are you someone that values the process? Are you someone that values sustainability and longevity? Someone that doesn't mind waiting a bit for the results? It all depends. It's like opting between an aggressive cut or like a sustained cut where you only cut 500 calories for 4 months, or you cut 1,000 for 4 weeks. It depends on your personality. It depends on who you are as a person. All I would say is that with the flooding, just be more careful, because depending on what you're trying to overcome, what fear you're trying to overcome, there can be trauma left behind. But that's a video for another day. But I hope you guys enjoyed it. Yeah, see you guys tomorrow.